All right, so you wanted to ask me some questions about something or other, a post on Facebook, maybe?
Well, okay, I did want to get your input on it was a conversation that I was following on Kira's wall,
Kira Davis, this is.
and yes, um, I didn't get there's like 258 comments, so I know I didn't get notifications on this. Um, my questions might have been answered. I have no idea. But Kira posted, Dear non Black conservatives, I have news for you. Black people do have the police talk with their kids. It happens. No, it is not the same talk you have with your kids. Yes, it is okay to just be okay with this fact and move on. You don't have to make a federal case out of something that really is a reality for Black people in this country. Not everything is about you. Okay? So I'm curious, first of all, if your parents had a talk with you about how you would deal with police if
Honestly,
something.
no. Never happened. No. Honestly, that's just the long and short of it. I've never had that kind of talk. I was taught to respect police officers. And taught to obey the law, but leaving that but besides that, it's like no, never had a unique conversation. But then again, I don't think my
Okay.
father's ever had a run-in with police officers in that regard. So, as my father would be the one to be affected by it. My mother wouldn't be. She passes as white, frankly. But yeah,
Okay. Well, I think there was one other black man that said that he didn't have any kind of special talk. It was basically, respect the police and don't break the law. Um, But then a lot of people had a lot to say about how they've been unfairly profiled, the conversations that their parents had with them, the conversations that they feel they have to have with their children.
mm-hmm.
One person said that if they ever got lost or needed help, that they should not go to the police. It was something that it was at school one day. They had, I guess, police and different things, firefighters all come and talk to the kids, whatever. And they were saying, if you're lost, if you need help, whatever, you find a police officer and you talk to him. So
Mm-hmm.
when they got home, their parents asked them, well, what did they tell you to do? And they told their parents to find a police officer, and that was they said absolutely not. You do not ever go to a police officer. You find any other adult, literally any other adult, and talk to them. And which is, I think, kind of ridiculous because any sane adult who isn't going to harm a child is then going to find a police officer. So you're just sort of having too many middlemen in this equation. um
I have some thoughts, but I'd rather you get through your questions before I actually get to them.
okay. um
That way I don't inadvertently like preempt you or anything.
it was interesting to me because there were a lot of white people who were saying, this is BS. We all have to have conversations with our kids about how they interact with police officers. Um, all the black people except for that one was like, y'all have no idea what we have to deal with and what we live through and all this kind of stuff. So there was a lot of polarization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at first I just said that the police talk I have with my daughters will be different from the talks that others have with their sons. It's just because that's what's needed. Um, I talk to my kids about if, you see lights and you have to pull over, you don't do that on a deserted road. You go somewhere that's well lit and where there's other people. Um, and this, it's not necessarily having to do anything with police abusing authority,
Mm-hmm.
but there are cases where people are impersonating police
Right.
officers and they kidnap, young women. So, I kind of felt like needs must. You have to, whether you like it or not, you have to speak to the need. And so I could understand why some people would have a different conversation with their Black children. Now, all right, getting to some of the other stuff. You gotta find it first of all. All right. Okay, so one guy is talking about how it basically comes down to empathy. You either have empathy for other people's struggles or you don't. And Kinder spoke up and said, or you live the same struggles. Now, then the Black guy, his name was Darvio, he said, it ain't the same. I don't know too many white people who fear dying when they interact with police, and the ones that do are the ones who come from our neighborhoods, and yada, yada, yada. And basically, Kinder said, but I did come from those neighborhoods, and, I did have those kind of experiences and interactions. And basically, my response to that is, I said, maybe we should do each other the courtesy of not making assumptions. I mean, you say we have no way of knowing what you've experienced as a Black man, but you presume to know the experiences of all or most white people. I've traveled the country, I have friends all over, and no two individuals are going to have the same experience with law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Reiterated their concerns I have as a woman that you don't have as a man. So I understand that sometimes you have to explain and prepare your child for certain eventualities. I get that. It is what it is. I just don't think making broad assumptions is helping either side in this debate. Mm-hmm. And I think that, there are two very definite schools of thought in this. There are the white people saying, oh, that's BS. We have these conversations too. And then there are the Black people saying, you white people have no idea. You could never understand. You don't know what we've been through. And I think that's silly because honestly, just based on your background, you would have probably less tense interactions than, say, Ruth has had because of where she's lived.
Right.
So, it has nothing to do with black and white. It's just, people experience things differently mm-hmm. across the board. Okay, so then I did have some questions.
I would say that's a very long preamble to a question.
Darvio was saying he said people act like we enjoy this, like we're just making this up. And he talked about all of his terrible experiences, being pulled over, and there were a lot of white people saying, yeah, but I had experiences, and they were all awful, and it was just terrible all around. And Kira spoke up and said that her husband was stopped. I guess driving in the wrong neighborhood or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, here are the questions that I posed. This being the case, 1, why would any black person ever act in a confrontational manner with police? If all these white people are like in fear of their lives and giving their children special talks about, how to save their own life, if they should get pulled over. Why would a black person ever act in a confrontational manner? That just seems counterintuitive. It seems like, death wish.
It's also just bizarre in its own. It's also just a bizarre way of thinking in its own way. It's like, just teach your kids to behave as normal human beings that are not up to anything bad, unless they are up to something bad, at which point, well, what the hell is your kid doing with his life? But
yeah. My second question, why would a black person see law enforcement as a desirable or viable career? If police are always the enemy, why would a black person ever go into law enforcement? And how do you change the way that law enforcement handles or deals with or interacts with your community if you're not engaged in it? And then three, what do you think would change this perception of guilty until proven innocent? If black people are indeed being profiled unfairly, pulled over at alarming rates for no other reason that they're black or they're in the wrong neighborhood or they're driving a nice car, then what's the solution to that? How do you address that? So.
Interesting.
And those questions weren't answered. So I'm just wondering if you have anything to add.
Well, if you want my honest opinion on the basic, conversation, I'm not going to presume to judge black parents, who have a special talk with their kids about things. I think a lot of it has to do, though, with, where you grew up and so forth, the environment you grew up in, because, depending on... Because depending on the jurisdiction...
Oh, that's what I was saying. I'm not going to judge them because I am going to have a conversation with my girls that's different than, say, a person would have with their sons.
Right. Depending on the jurisdiction, that's going to color your perception of what police officers are, what police officers do, how police officers behave. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. And I do think there is a sort of troubling undercurrent among white conservatives where they will sometimes deny that these things happen at all. I don't think it's universal, and I don't think it's necessarily as bad as some people will sometimes perceive it to be. But I do think there's this certain undercurrent where a lot of conservatives, to use some leftist language, a lot of privileged conservatives will make assumptions that they really should not be making about people's experiences. And this is part of what makes it very difficult for some conservatives to actually connect with leftists and liberals who are even slightly open. They end up shutting off that valve entirely because they deny that there's any potential reality to the claims made by certain interest groups and so forth. I think that's just as bad and unhealthy as the stuff we were talking about at the beginning of the show. That being said, I don't know. I feel like Kira's post was very confrontational, unnecessarily so. I feel like the point could have been made in a way that doesn't make it sound automatically like every white person is dumb for not necessarily just understanding, because I think that there is some inherent just misunderstanding in this regard, because when you don't experience something yourself, certainly I haven't. I've never had a bad interaction with police officers. When you don't experience something yourself, you just generally don't get the same sort of, what am I trying to say here? When you don't experience something yourself, you're gonna have a harder time empathizing with someone over certain experiences. And this isn't, of course, universally true across all types of experiences. But certainly in ones like this, where if you've only ever had positive interactions with police officers, or when you say been pulled over for a speeding ticket or something, you've never had any trouble or anything, it's going to be different than if you lived in the ghetto and you always see police officers beating down doors because there's always some sort of drug dealer 3 units down or something. It's always going to be it's going to be inherently different.
And I think that police officers in high crime areas, they kind of fall victim to cynicism. Right. People talk about, police officers that didn't take their concerns seriously, or, they didn't pursue a case as, passionately as they should have.
Right.
but I think that, that's just a symptom of, the job that's worn on them. And I honestly, the fact that people do take advantage of law enforcement, they report things that aren't criminal because they're
Mm-hmm.
being petty,
Right.
or the cops are trying to investigate something and people don't want to talk because they don't want to be known as the snitch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's impossible for them to get any information. And so I do think that sometimes you have instances where people have legitimate complaints that, the police aren't helping them,
Right.
but it's just because the police are, they've become really so
They're
cynical,
they're cynical, or in
thinking,
some cases they're swamped and overworked, or
yeah, just because people don't want their help,
mm-hmm.
or, they try to abuse them, or, and so I can understand that. And,
I feel like this
you
whole
know,
conversation in the end kind of boils down to the fact that there's just a lack of understanding on both sides of that perspective. You know, I
it
feel
really
like
is.
I feel like Kira, who's usually pretty well balanced, usually pretty usually pretty it's pretty good perspective on things. Didn't take the best
Yeah.
perspective on this.
I kind of got the feeling that she might have just been frustrated and reached her limit with somebody somewhere else
Mm-hmm.
and took it to her wall. Um, and it didn't help that, there were lots of white people there saying, oh, that's bull crap. You can't say that this and that and the other, trying to dictate her experience to her,
Mm-hmm.
or her husband's experience, or any of that. But at the same time, it was hypocritical for every black person on that post, save one, to say, to sit there and try and dictate the experience that every white person has had, and to say, none of y'all understand, and you don't have to deal with this, and all of that, because some white people do. They do understand. They have had to deal with it, and they've had similar, almost identical experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's highly hypocritical to say, white people, y'all just be quiet because you don't know what we're going through. And, at the same time, all y'all white people go through things differently, and you don't understand this because you haven't dealt with this. As if either side can sit there and, dictate the other's perception or reality. It's just silly.
Amusingly enough, it goes right back to the very thing we were talking about at the beginning of the show.
Thought police.
Anyway, so there was one more thing I believe you wanted to bring up regarding
Was it?
Disney.
Oh, okay. Well,
Look at that segue. Anyway,
speaking of everyone arguing, Disney. That doesn't make any sense.
no, that actually makes complete sense. Everyone always argues over
Actually,
Disney.
oh my gosh, it would have been perfect if you would have said, perhaps they should let it go. Let it go, let it go. Oh, say
Get
it's
on
not
with
a
it.
shot anymore.
Get on with it.
Go, let it go. He's gonna face plant on the floor. Okay. So Disney has decided they're gonna pull their content from Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to open their own streaming service. Woohoo! I don't like this idea because it complicates my life, honestly. Um, and I understand that Netflix stocks took a hit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that is necessarily a great move on Disney's part, because people don't really want to have to diversify and go, spend money on several streaming services. They kind of
Right.
want things to come to one.
Right.
So, it might work, but I feel like they're not going to reach as many people
I
having
think
their own
that
streaming service.
I think that on balance, it's a bad idea because the problem is that a lot of media companies have been looking at the success of Netflix and Hulu, and they want to cut out the middleman and get in on a piece of the action. The problem being that I feel like they're not really realizing that in doing that, they're really just slicing up the market. They're making it so that you get less individuals. Like take for example CBS. CBS wants to do its all access thing, and in order to promote it, they have made Star Trek Discovery an all access show. Leaving aside the merits of whether or not Discovery is going to be a good show, I don't think it's going to be. But leaving all that aside, taking into consideration of like taking this market where it's like pretty much dominated by two to four like major companies. What you do when you create your own service, first of all, is create a very niche market. That's the first thing you do. But second of all, as you said, people aren't going to want to diversify their streaming services. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a bunch of people who don't want to pay for both Netflix and Disney streaming, and they're just going to move from Netflix to Disney streaming. And then you're going to get that like little slice that's like people who overlap because they have the money to do it. And then you're going to have all those people who stay with Netflix because Netflix has the greater selection.
Yeah.
And I think that in the end, no one really wins.
It's odd too because Netflix has the original Marvel series, and Marvel and Disney are sort of one and the same. And it's not one and the same.
Disney owns the rights to Marvel, basically.
So then Disney's going to take their children's movies and I guess stuff like Age of Ultron or different things that they have the rights to their streaming service, but then those Marvel series that are Netflix originals are going to stay on Netflix.
I guess they're certainly going to take their original IPs with them. But as for things that I guess I don't know how, I guess like maybe they'll try something different with anything as like a sort of a secondary IP, things that are more owned by a different company like Marvel. It'll be interesting to see how it's like say Star Wars is affected, Lucasfilm and its branching subsidiaries are affected by this.
Yeah, so I mean it's not like, the Star Wars films were on Netflix, but you did
but like
have
the Clone Wars is though.
Clone Wars and different things. But I mean, it's just because Netflix was so diverse, people could sort of find a lot of things that they liked and, consume that. And I think that, in a way, garnered companies like Disney more customers, expanded their customer base.
Yeah, it expanded. That's a good point.
When they, sort of go off and do their own thing, you're not going to reach people with all those sort of smaller, lesser known series. And honestly, you're not going to reach as many people with the big, the big movies.
Because the thing is,
as my kids have gotten older, it's not like a big deal for us to go and watch like the Disney Pixar movies in theater anymore. But when they're on Netflix, we do.
Right.
And if we really like it, we might go and buy it. With Disney leaving Netflix, we're just not going to watch it. So we don't know if we like it.
I think it's going to create a particular problem in that, like, a lot of people, like, the people who are going to, like, subscribe to Disney streaming service are going to be people who already, like, are, like, big fans of Disney. You're saying about how it's not going to reach as many people. It's because it's not going to reach the people who are, like, kind of, like, maybe only, like, borderline interested in things that are produced by the Disney brand. Maybe even things they don't even realize are produced by the Disney brand.
I have a cabinet full of Disney movies because I had 3 little girls and, just growing up, I had different movies. My little sister had different movies. So it's not like I'm, ambivalent or, uncertain about Disney. I know what they have to offer. But as my kids have gotten older, we just don't care as much anymore. I mean, it's just not something that we actively go and seek out. Whereas, the sort of action movie genre is what we go seek out.
Right.
So, I mean, I never would have watched Moana if it didn't come on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason that my nephews watch Moana is because my brother could download it on Amazon Prime.
Right.
So, I mean, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Netflix, these are sort of the companies that, they they have a proven record.
They define the market, basically.
Yeah. And I get we've sort of had a larger conversation for a while about cable and satellite TV and how people are not really looking to spend $50-$60 a month on 200 channels that they don't watch. So a lot of people are looking to only buy certain seasons of certain shows, or they only want to stream stuff that they can get online through these other vendors such as Amazon or Netflix. Right. So we've discussed how streaming and digital media has changed that, it's just easier for people to sort of pick and choose what they want and not to pay extra for all the other stuff. But, at the same time, if everything starts to split up and sort of have its own little niche, people aren't going to then pay more just to have more tiny little pieces of different things. I don't think that's how, the average consumer works.
Yeah, it's funny. It just occurred to me that I actually never talked about the thing I wrote on the website.
Oh.
We ended up talking for so long.
Of the average consumer, you should go to our website.
just as good a pitch as any, because I did write there something recently. It's actually related to the first topic of the show, though I took it in a different direction. Not going to discuss it now because, well, it's not really relevant anymore. I realized that I never pitched it or even discussed the ideas behind it at all.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Anyway.
Basically talking about the whole Google fiasco and the CEO's decision to fire the dude, and can versus should.
And then I kind of turned that into let's talk, how does this apply to the rest of life? But anyway. We want to thank you for watching Nerd Rage episode 177. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below. Be sure to subscribe for more. Also, check the links in the description below for links, of course, to fullfrontalnerdery.net, literally just mentioned. And also to our social media pages. You can find us both on Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find Shannon at
Limbus_N_Coffee. And you can find me on Instagram at Limbus and Coffee.
You can also find me at OscaronPhayer, OSCRONPHAER, for gaming-related tweets. I hope that the Twitter stays that way, frankly, because it's becoming less and less likely it will as I get more and more annoyed by the general state of things. Also, you can check out my YouTube channel of the same name, where there is definitely no politics. And we will catch you next week for more discussion, more shenanigans. There weren't many shenanigans this week. Maybe more shenanigans instead of discussion next week.
Maybe. Perhaps more nerdery.
We shall see.
Lots of...
Until next week, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, we're good.
Pretend. Okay.
What is that?
It's a kitty toy.
I couldn't even tell. It was too close to the camera. Oh, I see it. I can see it.
Colorful feathers. Yeah.
Why do you torture your cats with that? Can they even see half those colors? Well, they have to be able to eventually. I think about it. Anyway,